I'm excited to be joined on the podcast today by one of the first guests I've had somewhere in that first week. He's now at UC Davis. At the time, he was in Lawrence, Kansas. I think Lawrence University, now at UC Davis as the running backs coach. And just somebody I've been able to connect with from the time I was back with VHS tape. I remember sending some stuff to him, emailing him, and getting back this VHS tape couple weeks later, and it really became the core of what we were doing in our offense, and then a ton of the principles kind of just carried forward. So joining me is the godfather of the fly offense, Coach Mark Speckman. Mark, it's great to be talking ball with you here, even though this is a challenging time.
Well, it is. It's a crazy, surreal time, but it's great to be able to talk football and have a little normalcy, and appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, I told you we had some questions from our listeners submitted to us on Twitter, and I'm going to consolidate some of these, but some good questions here, all related to the fly sweep, and certainly is, if you look back, even this past season, I think it's grown even more. Just about every offense has some element of this, including guys in the NFL now, right? It's really taken over the NFL. You see it both from under center and the gun. You see all the types of exchanges, the handoff, the pop pass, all those kinds of things. For you, in looking at it, being one of the original guys to do this, how exciting is it to see that influence it's been on the game?
Well, it's really exciting because, I can remember newspaper articles saying, is it fly or is it folly, and questioning our offensive output. And, people when I coach high school at upper level saying, well, it's just a high school offense, or when I got to Willamette, it's just a smart kids offense, or, now obviously everybody's running it. It used to be people would call me up if the 49ers ran a sweep, and it was really pretty novel. And now, of course, my phone would be ringing off the hook. So it is really, it's heartening. And I mean, it's not like I wrote a song and I get royalties for it. That's, my wife points that out all the time. And, but it just, obviously I believed in it. I hung in there. I kind of preached it, and it's neat to see it taken off, no doubt.
Well, shoot, Coach, if you got royalty for every time that play was run, and you'd be sitting pretty right now.
I would be. I thought I was on an airplane once, and I sat next to a musician who was in a pretty popular 90s group, and they had kind of fallen out of the top, and they were just doing gigs around the country. But he said they get 8 cents for every Apple iTunes purchase. And I started doing the math. I go, that could be pretty good if I got 8 cents for every sweep. But, hey, I didn't invent it, and I just passed it on, and I just developed, different ways of doing it. So that's what's kind of cool about football. So, I mean, a lot of people shared with me, and, I've been able to share with a lot of people.
That is, I think, what's the coolest thing about football is when you're putting things together, like, there's a lot of playbooks that look the same. There's some coaches who just copy paste, but then there's the coaches who look at and study all these different elements of offense and repackage it in something that makes sense for the guys they have in the situations they have, and it becomes uniquely theirs, right? So they may not have been the guy who invented that scheme, but because of the way they use it and how it all fits together, because none of these plays anybody runs are in isolation. They're all within the framework of some kind of context of the game and what's been run before it, after it, etc.
Well, yeah, that it really is, and it's a lot. The Wildcat looks a lot like the old single wing, and so obviously different size bodies and different maybe offensive line splits and different philosophies and different size football than the old days, but still comes down to there's an A gap, a B gap, a C gap, and a D gap, and you better cover them all on defense, and you got to get the ball through one of them and on offense. And so it is, again, I've never made the claim that I invented the fly sweep, but I will say I developed an offense around it. And so obviously just taking a lot of different ideas. I used to go to clinics all the time and hear people or talk about stuff I was never going to do, but I still got some great ideas, and a lot of the stuff I got was just from listening to them and then saying, well, how could how would I do that? Or drawing a play up and then putting a guy in motion and seeing how it changed it. And so, yeah, it's an interesting profession that you do share a lot and give a lot and take a lot. And it's, ultimately, hopefully kids are going to have a great experience playing the game.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, though, you take that 8 cents a play gladly.
At the end of the day, I would gladly take 8. No, and I would even 4 cents would be fine too. So I don't want to be greedy.
We'll get the information, coaches, if you want to send checks later.
Thank you. I'll give you my post office box.
Well, this podcast has been designed as a way to get ideas and a way for coaches to do that while maybe they're doing other things, working out, driving, whatever. And you know, it's been amazing how far this has come since you and I talked the first time here. And we're going to allow guys to get some more ideas today, and we've opened it up for questions. And what I've noticed, Coach, as I've done this, especially with the offensive guys, the defensive guys are creeping into this conversation. They're doing some recon here to try to figure this out. So what we'll do is we'll get their questions away out front, and maybe they'll go away and stop listening after that.
All right. All right.
So I do have a question from Rob Everett, who was defensive coordinator at Bridgewater, and then he went on to the AAF until that folded, as well as Jacob Phillips, who's a defensive coordinator at Centennial High School. And basically, these guys are looking for information on what is toughest against the fly. So question is, what type of defensive structures gives the fly sweep the most trouble? For example, coverage technique, shell, force, etc.
You know, I get that question a lot over the years. It's been asked a lot, and my stock answer is always, I've had my butt kicked by every defense, and I've kicked every defense's butt, and which means that, you know, you should be able to beat. I think good offensive scheme is going to be able to attack all the defenses. That being said, I always like watching Army Navy because, you know, if anybody going to know how to stop the option, it's going to be one of those two schools. And, you know, so it's interesting to see that what they do to the option and what they, you know, what their defensive coaches come up with. And it's a question I used to ask all the time when, you know, whenever I would leave a high school, I would go talk to defensive coordinators at schools we played that I really thought did a good job against us and pick their brains on, like, what did you think? What was our, and they loved talking to me about stopping an offense. And so I got a lot of really good ideas that way. I think, you know, again, the older you get, you can never answer a question in a sentence, you know, and so it's a little bit of a long answer, but I just think, you know, not changing a lot of what you're doing is probably the best thing to do. And then really studying what that team does in the sense of, can they, I mean, you can stop the fly sweep out of any defense, and you just got to commit people to it. And our philosophy, you know, my philosophy where I've coached is, hey, we're going to beat you with the sweep, and we're going to beat you with the sweep. And or really, we're going to beat you with the sweep, or we'll beat you with the sweep, meaning, hey, we'll just run it around you if you let us. And if you won't let us, you're leaving yourself vulnerable somewhere. And when we really majored in the fly, or at places I've been, there's been very few teams that have totally stopped our sweep game. But to do it, you have to commit a lot of people. And I think a real effective way to do it is to use the corner to trap. So when they see motion coming, they kind of hit it. Now, obviously, you're leaving, you know, you don't get a great safety rotation down. And I think that's been tough, but most corners aren't that physical. And so, you know, it's got to be the right guy. You know, I think a lot of people, you know, I would think if I was a defensive coach, and I usually tell people how many ways do they run the sweep? Meaning, is it always outside? If it's only one way, just take it away. And as soon as you take it away, most coordinators will get away from it. And if they're really good at it, and you know, and I, you know, again, obviously, you know, tooting my own horn, we would never get out of it. We would say, okay, great, this is the next type of sweep we're going to try, and we would have an answer. So if a team runs, you know, a cut it up sweep and a get outside sweep, and if they have a variety, then, you know, that they're, to me, that they would be a little bit more dangerous, because they could catch you a little bit. But if a team dabbles in it and they just run a little bit of sweep, you know, getting the 5 technique upfield can be good, or bringing the outside linebacker to the sweep side every time there's motion can be good. And obviously some teams bring the backside outside linebacker, take away the, you know, other plays. So, you know, those are things that have worked, and we've had to study and, you know, say, okay, if we see this, you know, this is what we have to do. And we, you know, you should have some kind of a counter to it, whether it be a pass play or a run play. So I don't know if that answered that or not, but kind of, there are things you can do, but just really scout your opponent. And I mean, how committed to this thing are they? And if it's just something they do to try to cause a little confusion and they don't run out a ton and they're not great at it, then I would, I'd storm the castle to the side the sweep's coming from.
I think you make a really interesting point there too. Having, I guess, multiple versions of the sweep. And I know from when I first learned it from you, it was, the green light, the red light, and the yellow light sweep. Has that been something you've carried with you as this has been part of the different offenses you coached?
It really has been. And it's when I was the head coach, we always had time to make it work because I was in charge of the schedule. And then as an assistant coach in Montreal or, here at Davis, I'm not really making the schedule. And so what I've learned is that we have to have all those. And I think we're sold, on having them all, but we just got to limit the number of them, and we've got to make them very as teachable as possible. And that's been something I've learned for teams that aren't going into this whole hog. But we do have a yellow light sweep, a green light sweep, and a red light sweep. We'd like to. I mean, sometimes you just don't have a guy to do it or the blockers to do it, but in theory, that's what we would like to be able to do.
So, Coach, in looking at, we'll stick with that, those kinds a little bit. The practice time you mentioned, right? That's a big part of this. The mesh timing, the path, the blocking variations. And so Matt Langley from Caldwell, Texas, wanted to know exactly about that. If you're going to do, the fly sweep, if you're going to build around the fly sweep, what kind of practice time allotment are you going to give it to those different things, the mesh, the path, the blocking variations?
Well, I think that's a key question. And, sometimes you got to think about, is it minutes or is it reps? And sometimes we think of practice in minutes, and sometimes you really only need X number of reps. I think really, how many reps? That's one of the questions that I've been asking myself the last few years is like, well, how many reps do we really need at this to get really good at it and to give them the looks they're going to get? And so I think that the mesh part of it is crucial. And so, but I think you can do that for 3-5 minutes a day. Some schools, I used to take the quarterback and the sweeper during special teams if they weren't involved, and we'd steal reps. We're always trying to steal reps. And people were having an inside run drill, and we're just running basic run plays, but we would still bring a sweeper through just to practice the timing. And we would, anytime it was on film, we would coach it up, and we would coach the fake or this timing or the mesh as much as we would coach the footwork of an offensive lineman or the read by the running back. And so I think we usually when I was majoring in this, we would have a mesh period of again we did it in minutes, and 5 minutes with the running backs and the sweeper and the quarterback, and we would usually do twice a week a perimeter run session. Could be one of them could be a walkthrough, but we would really concentrate on the perimeter blocking, and then during practice, you just constantly motioning people, and again it's not all the time, it's not 100%, but it can be 30%. It could be 70% of the plays during your scout period or your team periods have some kind of motion on it. And so those accumulated reps, and really when I sat down and counted them, I was amazed how many reps we got at it. And we're good at it. And I think we're good now at it. I think, one of the things that I think we do really well at Davis is we have a really good mesh. And because that is something that just through the, I don't know how many minutes we really give it, but we give it some, but we give it a lot of reps, and just throughout practice.
So sticking with the mesh, you got three guys who kind of had the same question here. Coach Spencer from Goodyear, Arizona, Richard Russo from Horn Lake High School, and Coach Wiggins all wanted to know about preference as far as the mesh, the exchange, probably is a better word, the exchange from gun. We've seen the little toss pass become popular. I think it was Bob Stitt maybe, the School of the Mines brought it, and over and talking with Dana Holgerson, and Dana Holgerson started doing it, and then everybody started doing it. So Any thoughts as far as the preference on that? Which do you prefer? And I guess the biggest argument you hear from the other side that the toss up or the pass is better is that it gets to the edge quicker. Thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a really good question also. You know, when I learned it, we were all, you know, I have film from the 50s, this guy doing it where it looked like a wing T formation. The two backs are in 3-point stances. The motion guys cocked in 45 degrees and right off the tackle or tight end's foot. And, you know, and then nowadays it's a spread offense and nobody's in a 3-point stance. And so I think all that stuff's kind of, it doesn't matter. I think it's just how your preference or what system you want to run. But if you're behind center, I think you can get outside faster. You know, I'd love to do a time analysis study of it. And
I think it's pretty simple math, Coach, when you think about it. There's just that added element that it's going to take longer if you're doing anything from shotgun.
Yeah, but you are deeper. And so I think you need to kind of determine what kind of when I was at Lawrence, and actually it was Lawrence in Wisconsin, Appleton, Wisconsin. But the last time I was office coordinator, I was there, and we were about 50-50. And that to me, I really like that. And so we would work behind center mesh, and then we would work the shotgun mesh. A lot of people think the behind center mesh is more deceptive, and I think there's some truth to that, and I would agree. But yeah, I think it's pretty deceptive in the gun too, done properly. And I think what people forget is that when that ball snapped and that offensive line rises up a little bit, and all those things are happening in the backfield, you know, unless you're really, really staring at the football, and most defenses don't teach their kids to do that. They're reading some kind of a key. They don't see that mesh point. And I've seen a lot of people running after fakes in the shotgun just like they do from behind center. I think the behind center one, if you're behind center, I think the quarterback's got to control the mesh, and he's got to control the snap count. And we try to get the quarterback to take what we call the fly step, and you always turn to the sweeper. Try to get about I always set a yard, but if they got half a yard or 3/4 of a yard, that was good enough. And I had one of my best quarterbacks ever just hopped, and he was good at it, and I couldn't change it, so we just let him do it. But we'd like to be, we'd like our back to be the defense and we called it dealing cards. We want to deal cards from there. And then when you're in the gun, I don't think the quarterback can control the snap count anymore. I just think it's too hard for him to read safeties, read defenses, catch the football, time the sweep, and it's very difficult. And so way back in the early 2000s when this was, when I was toying with the shotgun, I said, I just don't think we can do it. And one of the kids at Willamette, so a coach, one of the sweepers, said, I can see the football. And I said, well, we all can see the football. But his point was, I'll get there when the ball gets there. And that really, I think, made it easier for us to run the sweep out of, or the mesh out of the gun. So our backs, the guys, we call them sweepers. Our sweepers are building speed in the gun, and they don't need to be going 100 miles an hour, 100%. They need to be building speed. And I always tell players, hey, if you're standing still and I'm walking, I'm faster than you. And so, if we can get to full speed within 2 steps after getting the football, I still think we can get around the 5 technique. And so that change of philosophy of having a different mechanism of who's in charge of it really helped, because I think it's really important if you want to have a good mesh, no matter how you do it. I mean, I see a lot of teams where the sweeper's going in motion, the quarterback's behind center, and everybody's tentative, like, am I going too fast? And I would always tell my sweepers, hey, it's not if he doesn't snap it, you just keep running and think about how much I'm going to be yelling at the quarterback, because it's not your problem. Same thing with the quarterback. In the gun, I say, hey, all you got to do is, I don't care if it's high and left, or I have film of guys picking it off the ground and just kind of their head's still down, but they're holding the football up, and the sweeper gets it, and we get a big play. And so the bad snap is the enemy of the shotgun. And so we've even practiced, high lefts, low to the right. So don't always in the practice make that, snap perfect. You don't want to make it up, waste a rep, and stress the quarterback a little bit. So he's got to concentrate on it. And so basically that ball hits the quarterback's hands and it's shotgun, it's boom. and then that sweeper is covering the football. It's boom. So if I go boom, boom, that's too slow. If I go boom, boom, that's about right. And that's really the kind of, I think, how you create consistency in your mesh is timing the motion guy.
Definitely. It's something, when I was at Baldwin Wallace, what really stuck with me, what I really liked from when we were running it under center was that whole aspect of dealing cards. I did like the quarterbacks, back getting to the defense and that ball disappearing a little bit in those, it's kind of principle of the wing T, right? Like you end up having three guys on the midline, each going different directions afterwards, and someone's got the ball. So that to me was important. And we were a pistol team, but we had one of those guys who could really be good at the sweep. And we started everything we were doing was we basically had the same actions as if we were under center. So I really liked the timing of what we did. We'd reverse out on all our runs. So he'd catch, and I told him, we're turning you into an old spinner back. And so the way we made that fit, though, and it didn't mess a lot with what the things we were doing was, instead of coming in front, is he went behind like the quarterback was still under center, since that's how we were treating. And it actually worked out well. Now, it wasn't necessarily the speed you see of, like, a guy running a jet sweep who's got the ball and 2 steps into it, he's in full speed. I mean, we were pretty close though, but it was still, that effect of somebody's attacking the flank with the sweep, somebody's running in the middle, somebody's attacking the other flank with a naked or a bootleg, and those kinds of things work well together. So it's one of those things, like, I don't think any of this, and I think you'd agree, is not necessarily an either or. It's one of those things that what works best for your guys and what you're trying to do. And back to what we said before, like, what did you build around this? How does this fit into what you're doing?
I didn't want to change. I didn't want 2 offenses, and I didn't want 2 motions. And I always felt as a defensive coach, if they did a cross, behind the court, let's say they're behind center, or let's say you're in shotgun, you go in front of the quarterback in motion, or you go behind in an orbit type motion. I always thought that kind of was a tell for the defense, because you couldn't do all your plays. If you went behind, there were certain things they did, and if you went in front, there were certain things they did, and they could still kick your rear end, but at least you knew what was happening. But my whole thing was, hey, I wanted to be able to run my under center offense from shotgun. I didn't start out that way. I just wanted to get a short quarterback. It was 3rd and 7. We were going to throw the ball. Who's kidding who? Let's give the guy a chance and put him in shotgun and see if he can see a little bit better, give him a little bit more time. And then you say, well, now every time we're passing, so I bet no. And then we worked out the sweet part of it, but then we just kept our same running back paths, and we kept our same running back plays, and then we had a quarterback that could really run. And so then all of a sudden it became, I thought, really dangerous. And because now a 1-back offense becomes a 2-back offense, and a 2-back offense becomes a 3-back offense. And you have all those variations of people going different directions and things you can do and ways to leverage the defense. And so I just felt like the key, whether they, however you did it, was just time the mesh so that guy threatened the flank on the sweep.
Well, going along with that, Coach, I think this is a good question. This is from Coach Summers, who is at St. Francis University in British Columbia. He says, what are the base principles behind splits to maximize leverage within a fly sweep scheme?
It's another good question, and one we've really kind of gone round and round with here at Davis. And the longer I did it, the more I got into big splits. And my thought process was, if you want to get to the D gap, most people say, let's cut our splits down, and the D gap's a little bit closer for us. But it hurts your inside run game, especially if you're not a dominant zone blocking team or they don't have great offensive alignment. And so we kind of evolved to getting big splits, and I just figured that, hey, if my guy's running and you're standing still, and each lineman gets 1 foot bigger split, that's a yard. We can probably make a yard up pretty quick if I'm running and you're not. And so we had a lot of success with that. And then melding what we're doing here at UC Davis with the fly stuff, and Coach Hawkins did a great job of really getting a lot of good coaches and saying, okay, let's create this offense. And so we started out with pretty big splits, and we still have good splits, but we've tightened them a tad just because, you know, some of the zone plays and some of the things we want to run, whether we have motion or don't have motion. And so I think there's good argument either way. I just think it kind of comes down to, you know, are you good enough to have small splits with you in your league and create an A or B gap run? And if you're not, you might want to move your guys out a little bit. I don't think it makes a difference on the sweep personally. I think there's some people that would argue with me, but if you time it right, I feel pretty good that, you know, I've got a lot of film of us running sweeps with big splits.
Well, Coach, you've already kind of alluded to, you've seen it all and done a lot of different things, and even here, you know, the adjustments to what you're doing at UC Davis. But Blake Pressey from Kentucky wanted to know, what's the biggest adjustment that you've made with the fly since you started it?
That's a great question, too. These are all genius coaches you're dealing with. I think, you know, a lot of times I'll see a kid that played for me. He's not a kid anymore. He's probably a grandfather or something. I don't know. But I'll see somebody and I'll say, you know, I go, hey, coach, you still running that stuff? And I go, you know, you could step in our huddle and it'd be really familiar, and then you wouldn't know what the heck we were doing. And so, and I think I'm right. I mean, a lot of the plays look exactly the same, and obviously the terminology changes over the years. But even just what we're meshing together, you know, because when you have the fly sweep as part of your run game, or, you know, whether it be a big part or a small part, you're really using that sweep to do other things too, you know. And so I think you just kind of, the beauty of the system to me of doing something like that is you can kind of control the defense a little bit, how they're going to play to the side of the sweep. And then you can kind of utilize your personnel or your expertise, whether it be a, you know, an inside zone or a counter or power or combination of, or traps, you know, or, you know, all man blocking, all zone blocking, all gap blocking. It doesn't really matter. And that's what kind of kept me doing this all those years, because, you know, when you coach high school, guys change, you know, and sometimes you got a great quarterback, sometimes you don't have one, sometimes you have a tailback, sometimes you don't, sometimes you have a line, sometimes you don't, you know, so you're always juggling and hiding your weaknesses as best you can. And to me, that's what the fly does. It can hide your weaknesses. I would say the biggest difference is probably utilizing different pass games and pass protections and play action protections, the RPOs, all that kind of stuff off of the fly stuff has been really good. New things that I've had to learn and study, and then, you know, coming up with a productive mesh system out of the shotgun has been probably the other biggest thing that I've, you know, when I started I wasn't doing, and now that we are, now we're doing it quite a bit. So I'd say those would be the two different things. You know, when I was at Lawrence, we ran a lot of run and shoot principles in the passing game, and we're a lot of West Coast stuff here at Davis, and you know, it just kind of meshed. You know, in Montreal, we were doing all kinds of different things, and, you know, and of course you had 12 guys, and everybody could be in motion. So it's everywhere is just a little bit different. But those principles of, you know, how we getting around the defensive end, that bothers all the defensive coordinators, and that has my whole career.
I had a few guys kind of asking about the play off of that, especially the play action. Adam Wilson, Dustin Bolin, and Coach Spencer basically want to know what's the best play action for that off of the fly sweep. And I guess, would there be a variation between favorite play action and under center versus gun?
Again, a great question. We were running, you know, in the early 2000s at Willamette, we were really highly ranked nationally in rushing, and you would think we would be a great play action team. We had a pretty good quarterback and you know, good receivers, and we were okay, but it just wasn't like, it's like every time we called a play action pass, they covered it, and then we called a, you know, a run play, they were up. So to me, it was always kind of like I was always a play behind. And so one of my off-season projects was I was going to become a great play action pass coach, and I went to all kinds of different people, and one of the guys that really helped me was Andy Ludwig, who's now at Utah. And his, you know, what he taught me, and that really helped me, was like, there's play action passes you want to do to motion, And there's play action passes you want to do away from motion. And that seemed pretty simple, but and if you're really good at the sweep, you better be really good at understanding defensive rotations and defensive coverages. And we had a whole vocabulary of things we would use. And so the guy in the box would say, hey, that's a sky low roll. And I knew exactly what was going on. Or, hey, that's a cloud, that's cloud coverage. Or, we had, I think there was in the cover 3 and 1 high, I think we had 6 terms, and in 2 high we had 8 terms. And so you only saw it once a year, but we were ready for it. And there's only so many things you can do back there as a defensive coach. And some teams do nothing. They don't even rotate. They don't do anything. And so we try to come up with teams that, let's just start with teams that rotate. And we really tried to do things that, would isolate the backside receiver or get as many people to the backside as possible, like dragging a tight end, having so the single receivers running, a corner or an out, and the tight ends running across, or maybe a back, swinging out on a flare or something. But, try to get at least 2 guys or 1. If you got to, sometimes our receiver was better than their corner. And so we loved that, just going 1-on-1. That's just like Tuesday practice, period 16 through 18 was, 1-on-1 drill. And now you're just doing it in the game. And so kind of depends on your personnel. If you can single up a guy, that's great. And then the other thing is you can get, if they don't rotate, you can probably get a lot more people out to a side. And so we probably go more, more play action pass that way. And I would never put a play in that, I should say never, but most of our pass plays off of that were things we did anyway. And all we were doing was adding a sweeper. And the sweeper always ran the same route. He's just faking the sweep, and then he's just running a wide or a swing. And he's always a check down guy. And he's just about always open. And if guys go back, if they run this and look at their film, and, most of the time, after you fake them, nobody's really covering. And so I think whatever your best play is with a 3-man concept and a 2-man concept, I don't think there's anything that the fly adds other than sometimes we've had a 1 or 2-man screen in front of the sweeper and run everybody off and have the quarterback look downfield and then throw it to the sweeper and get some linemen in front of them. That's been good. Or you can do it to the back away from the sweep. You can run screens, and that's been good. But if you're a wide receiver screen guy and you get in a 3-by-1 formation, you run the fly and throw the screen back, has been good. So to me, it's really important just to kind of see what the defense is doing. I don't think there's any magic play. A lot of teams in the NFL are bringing that tailback down the seam off the sweep. And so they're running some kind of clearing routes with the receivers, or just running 4 verticals and 3 verticals, and then the sweeper's the swing guy. All that is good stuff. But I just think, whatever, if you have a flood or a snag or whatever your system is, just take one of those guys, whoever's a flat guy, have him be the sweeper, and it still works. And if you want to run a spot route in the corner and then flat, and then but if you just run, if the flat guy is a sweeper, you're going to get some action out of it, and he won't be in the flat, but he's still going to be basically in the same area. I hope that makes sense. And so I would just, if I ran the sweep, I'd make sure I had a go-to play that I really felt good about. One of my plays I really like was a run and shoot play, where you can, again, it could be 2 back or 1 back, it could be 2-by-2, but generally you're going to motion a guy and leave a single receiver. And that guy was going to run a go route, and he had a 10-yard rule. And if he couldn't, if we were even at 10, we kept going. We put it up or we back shouldered it. And if that corner was off, he stopped and turned to the sideline, and that ball was coming to the sideline. And that was probably one of our most successful plays. And you could, dress it up. You could do it to the side of the sweep. You could do it, which took care of those corners that wanted to trap. And you could hit that, hit the whole shot there if they're trying to play cover 2 behind it. But that was very simple. And of course, most kids think they can run by everybody. So the receivers were the problems. They get to 15 and go, I think I got him, coach. And they try to keep going. And you really had to work on that 10-yard mark. Right? And then the other thing I think is really important in play action, I was going to say, it's much easier in the shotgun. to go with the sweeper going from right to left or left to right. But I think if you're going to run something fairly quick, for example, that play I just said, which could, the ball should get out of the quarterback's hands pretty quick. Usually for a right-handed quarterback, we brought the sweeper from the left. So he turned to his left, and then as the throw was going to be to his right. And we could do something to the left, but we would take a 5-step or 7-step drop off the fake. So I think you just got to be, because otherwise you got a kid pirouetting around. And so I just think you got to be kind of careful in behind center play actions on what the quarterbacks, which side you're throwing to. And I think the bootleg, I think, is better out of the gun too. I just think there's less mechanics and less. I don't think you have to be as disciplined as a quarterback with a bootleg to your left or to your right out of the gun as you did behind center. It's much easier for a right-handed quarterback to go to his right.
We got a couple questions here, kind of a little bit more of the strategy type, I guess. And you mentioned a little bit of this in your last answer here, but Kyle Pettit, Scoop Reed, we're looking for a little bit and just things that you're looking at to find an advantage, from the defense, how their leverage, their movement, different ways you can attack. Is there a series of if-thens that take you to, well, I know, you're working the different sweeps, but also take you to the inside runs as far as the keys that you're looking at to make those decisions as the play caller?
Yeah, that's, again, a great question. When I started coaching with Coach Hawkins at Willamette, I was up in the press box calling plays, and then I did that for a few years, and I really thought that was the way to go. And in high school, I had some good coaches. I was on the field, but I wasn't up in the box. And I always felt blind, like I could kind of see stuff, but I really couldn't see it as well. That's me now. I'm not a quarterback or offensive guy, so maybe I'm not trained that way, and it just was tough. And then when I became head coach at Willamette, I stayed up, and I felt, hey, I could call timeouts. I could, I had good coaches on the field, and I could tell them what to do, and I could see kids on the bench, and I could see everything. And it was kind of a good way to do it. Then I kind of got to, the first half I was up, the second half I was down, and then, trained the staff, and we had some guys really good, and they went up. And so I've been on the field for quite a while. I was up in the box for a year or two with Davis, and that was good. But I'm not calling plays here, so and so I guess my point is I always wanted when I was on the field some kind of language, something that, like if I got kidnapped and was put in the trunk of a car and I still had my headset on and I could still call the game. And because I could see it in my head. And that's really what I think you want to do as a play caller, is be able to see it in your head. And I work with a guy, Coach Tim Plow, who's an amazing offensive coordinator at Davis. And he has an uncanny ability to see the field in his head. And he was a great quarterback, and he sees it like a quarterback. And it's really, really pretty impressive. But I didn't have that ability. And so to answer, it's a long preamble to, when we go in motion, first thing we're looking for is, what do you do? I mean, are you going to run with us? Are you going to rotate with us? Or are you going to stand there and just, and maybe, in some teams, and then the other thing is, are you going to bounce your linebackers? And those are really the four things people do: is they rotate the secondary, they run somebody with the motion, they don't do anything, or they bounce their linebackers. And maybe they slant the line or not, but that's not, you can't see that pre-snap. And then the second thing, it's, so if we think they're outnumbering us on the sweep, then obviously we think we have to go away from that. And then the other thing we look for is, how many, I know that everybody's counting the box, and that's big right now, but I always felt like we didn't have to count the box to the sweep side. I never counted the 5 technique to the sweep side or the outside backer to the sweep side, because he's got to at least stay out there for a step. He may come back in and make the tackle on an inside run, but we're going to get 5. And so, I counted, I didn't really count the box. I just want to see how many linebackers they had on the backside to stop any kind of backside run or pass. And so if there was inside, and like in a 4-4 defense, there's an outside backer and an inside backer, or 4-2, then we would call that there's 2 guys in the box. And so we were going to run to the side of the sweep inside. And if there's only one, then we were going to come back that way, to the side the sweep started from. And so, and then the third thing we would always look for is like, what is our D line trying to do? Are they slanting with the motion or away from the motion? And usually the offensive line would come off, and they were trained to kind of know, and they'd give us a pretty good idea of what they were doing. And some teams would just play irregular, and some teams would slant, and some teams, if you're really good at the sweep, you don't get a whole lot of inside linebacker blitz. And so those were kind of the principles that we went with, like from just the overall dashboard, bird's eye view of a game plan. Is like, what are they doing with that? Because you get a lot of information as opposed to just snapping the ball and going, what happened? Because you did nothing to manipulate the defense or cause them any grief. And so that was kind of my thinking all along, was how can I manipulate them pre-snap to give me some clues on how to call plays.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. And, sometimes as a play caller, you got to figure out what are those tools that get you to a certain call. And that's pretty simple, the way you laid it out there. I like that. So, Coach, we got two more questions for you here. The one probably doesn't require a long answer here. Chris Anderson from Castroville, California says, can you come back out to North County for one day and teach us the proper mesh drill?
I'd love to. That's where it all started, and I'd love to go back in the time machine and just enjoy that a little bit more. But I was young and dumb. But yeah, tell them I'm not that far away. I'll probably break 6 or 7 rules, but we'll see what happens.
And the last one I think is a good question. There's all kinds of resources today, but Jacob Morris wanted to know where's the best place to learn this? I know, Coach, for me, it was directly from you, and you were very gracious with your time to be able to send a young coach some things that really made a difference. But your thoughts on the best place to learn all the stuff we talked about as far as the fly sweep, putting it in your offense?
Well, I'll put a little plug in. I don't think we're going to have it this year. We're running in April. We're supposed to have the 24th annual fly clinic, and it's international now because we've had a guy from Canada and a guy from Germany come to it. But and it was pretty big at Willamette, and it's kind of as I've moved around, ebbed and flowed. But we were having here. I think there's some really good coaches that I'll just give. I think Pete Lavarado at the King's Academy does a really good job with it in California, and I think Whiteland High School, Darren Fisher has done a really good job in Indiana running his version of the fly offense, and Steve Ballack at Liberty High School in Washington has been a long time runner of the fly offense, and all those guys have had multiple winning seasons, and they kind of have their own twist, and they're high school guys, and not that that's any difference, but they're dealing with the same thing a lot of high school coaches are dealing with as far as, you get what you get in high school, and you got to make them winners. Ernie Cooper at Granite Bay's retired right now, but he had won a state championship in California, and he's really good with it. Phil Graham at who's an offensive coordinator at Lawrence University is a really good resource, and I know I'm forgetting some guys, but I think any of those guys, and again, if we could ever get, I always tell guys, if you can get to the fly clinic, I mean, you're going to make some great connections. Kevin Swartwood's not coaching anymore. He's a principal at Golden Valley High School, and I think he's one of the best, and he still helps out. Kevin Navarro at Buhack Colony. If I could go on, I mean, there's quite a few guys that and then a bunch of guys in college that are, I think BYU does a really nice job with their version of the fly, and I think Tennessee Tech does a really good version with them, and Matt Canada was doing a great job at LSU and Pitt. So if any of those guys and are in those areas, I think those would be great resources for
you. And Coach, I know this is everybody's trying to figure out what is recruiting going to be here for the rest of the spring, even moving into the summer. But I think it's important that coaches know where you recruit. So what areas are you responsible for?
At UC Davis, we're heavily California, but we do basically the Western United States. But my personal territory is the Sacramento area and the Santa Rosa, Napa, kind of that Highway 80 and Highway 50 corridors in California. So I'm kind of the local guy, and that's where I'll go other places just for running back specifically, but for just my general area, that's my area. And
Twitter, I'm sure, is always a good way to connect with you, Coach. What's your
Twitter
handle?
At Mark Speckman. It's very, very simple and a lot of thought into that.
Well, Coach, as always, it's great to talk ball with you. Thank you for taking the time, and good luck to you as we get out of this and then back into the normal flow of football, Coach.
I really appreciate it. It's been fun. It got my brain going, and I appreciate all you do for football too, Keith. You've done a great job with this podcast. It's gotten huge. So congratulations.
Thanks again for listening to the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. Get the show notes for this podcast and other articles and content at coachandcoordinator.com. Follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please go to Spotify or Apple and click 5-star for rate. If you have a minute, write a review. It helps the podcast.